So people ask me about starting a business and what I would need to do to start a business or how did I go about starting a business. And the truth be told, I never ever started a business. I didn't. I bought businesses. I did that, but I didn't start a business. My intuition tells me that if you're going to start a business, you got to be very cognizant of your cash position. You got to have cash to start a business. How you can be the greatest salesperson on the planet.
Welcome to the Rethink Sales Show. My name is Derek Kelly. I am joined by Jim Shorkey. And
Yes, you
Jim,
are.
we've talked in previous episodes about the value of profitability. Cash is king. Those pieces, expansion, growth. But what does it look like to start at zero? Did your dad ever tell you any stories of how they started, how they began? And what did that look like did he ever tell stories of just...
No, it wasn't really. No. What happened was my dad was selling stereo equipment at the Concerto Room, I think it was called, in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And Mr. Hamilton was a stereo guy. He loved stereo equipment. He was big time into that.
Yeah.
And so my dad was selling him stereo equipment, and Mr. Hamilton was very impressed with my father, and he recruited him into the car business. And this would have been around 1959. 1958. I'm not sure when.
That's cool.
But it was around that time
Yeah.
frame, in the late 50s, maybe early 60s. And so my dad ended up working for Mr. Hamilton as a car salesman.
Wow.
And he did very well, and then he moved up from there. And then Mr. Hamilton opened up a second store, to your point. But at that time, you weren't allowed to, there was something, this is my understanding, that he wasn't allowed to have more than one.
Like some kind of clause or
There was something that he wasn't, Mr. Hamilton, that is, was not allowed to have more than one GM dealership at that time. Whether that's true or not, that's the family lore. So the dealership was named Carlson Oldsmobile, and it was strictly Oldsmobile at that point. And Mr. Carlson was the dealer. He went through the approval process and everything. And my dad was the general manager of this new dealership. Of course, Mr. Hamilton owned the vast majority of the stock of that company, along with Mr. Carlson. Somehow they were able to do that.
Yeah.
And so that was in 1960, let's say, around there. 60, I think it was 60. So they were in this little building. It was literally the size of a gas station. And in 1968, Mr. Hamilton built where presently we have our Mitsubishi store. Mr. Hamilton built that building, the basic structure of it. And they moved the dealership from this little gas station type thing, literally right across the street from Jim Shorkey Kia on Route 30. That's where the original thing was. Down the road. And then it had become Jeep in the meantime, but it was Jeep in the little building. So it was called Carlson Oldsmobile Jeep. And then in 1974, my mother and father bought out Mr. Carlson. And so it was Mr. Hamilton and my dad were now the partners in the business.
Yeah.
And then over time, my father and I got together with Mr. Hamilton and we bought out Mr. Hamilton. That's how I ended up. And I actually bought it with my own money. I had a certain amount of money per month. It was a monthly thing. And that's what I did. So that's how it ended up being that I owned 25% of the stock, Amy and I should say. And then my mom and dad owned the other 75%. But that company itself started in 1974 when Mr. Hamilton when we bought it. That was in the 80s. Okay. So anyways, it was Courtesy Oldsmobile Jeep. And then from there, it just stayed there for the longest time. My dad died. It was Courtesy Oldsmobile Jeep. That was 1996. And then it went on from there.
Wow. That's such a cool story. I didn't realize so many folks were involved. And it shows the power of your dad just staying committed and staying focused. And it's not like he woke up one day and thought, I'm going to own a car dealership. Yeah. That wasn't. He was just being faithful with selling stereo equipment.
But back to your question, you start with what's day one look like? I don't know, because at that time I was in high school getting ready to go to college. I was the janitor. And so all I knew was my job was to keep those floors as clean as I possibly could and the garbage cans empty and all that. I took great pride in that job, and that's what I did. I was the janitor. I had no knowledge or understanding of what even a business was. All I know is that's where I reported to work. Went off to college, and I have an economics major from Millersville State College. So I have an economics major with a math minor, and that's what I did. And then I got involved in the business. I worked summer jobs there at the dealership. I got involved full time in January of 1979, and I learned and learned and learned. But one of the things my dad told me, a really good business principle, is that when you have a corporation, It is actually a legal being, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And much the same as a human being. And it's a legal entity. And my dad taught me this. I remember this like it was yesterday. He said, James, it's like a human body, a human being, a human entity. If you respect the business, it will respect you back. If you disrespect the business, it will disrespect you back. And I'll never forget that. And so how do you respect the business? You have to treat it the right way. You have to do the right things. You do have to make a profit. You do have to take care of your customers. You do have to take care of your employees, et cetera, et cetera. You have to respect the business. If you don't respect it, it'll shrivel up and die. That's what will happen. It'll go bankrupt. It'll go AWOL. So I learned that at a very young age. As far as how to start a new business, I don't know that I'm really qualified to answer that question because I never truly started a new business. Now, you could say, yeah, but you opened up that Kia dealership. Yeah, I did.
And then the Chrysler. Yeah.
But I already had a lot of cash
Under your
in
belt.
hand, and I had a lot of business experience, and I had the processes in place. So I guess I'd have to conjecture if I was going to start a new business, the first thing that I would determine, is there a need for what it is that I want to sell? Is there a need for the product or the service that I want to sell? And if there's not a need, then it's not going to work. And the higher the need, it's called the law of supply and demand. There's two things. So the demand has to be there. And so if I have the right demand, then I have an opportunity to satisfy that demand. And basically what it says is the higher the demand, the higher the price. The lower the demand, the lower the price. The higher the supply. In other words, yeah, there's a need, but there's 1,000 of these guys and girls out there doing what you want to do. Now you talk about that's competition. It's going to be challenging. But if there's a true high demand, but a low supply of what it is that you need to do, then again, the higher the supply, the lower the price. The lower the supply, the higher the price. It's called the law of supply and demand. It's an economic principle. And so we got to determine that because you have a great idea, but nobody wants it. Okay, it's not going to work. You have a terrible idea, that's not going to work. You have a great idea, it's a wonderful idea, but there's 1,000 people that are doing it. Not going to work. It's really going to be hard. It may work, but it's going to be hard. So the ideal situation would be to have a high demand, low supply situation, and then you go to work. And then from there, on day one, I've got to be process oriented. I've got to have the right processes in place. And that's the hard part for a new entrepreneur is that where do they get these processes at? And that's where, in our parlance of Rethink You 2.0, is expert counsel. So whatever that would look like, I'm going to read every book I can about business. And I did, by the way. I read them all. I read Henry Ford. I read Giuliani. I read the Southwest Air. I can go on Starbucks. I read that book. I read all the books I could read about business and how to run a business. And so I had a good idea, plus my training in college, economics major. I read a lot of books about millionaires. I wanted to understand that. Like, how do you get to be a millionaire? And it's interesting. You know what kind of car? There's a book. I read it. There's a book called The Millionaire Next Door. It's a great book. And they talk about the car that the millionaire drives. You know what the car that the average millionaire drives? You know what it is?
It's like a Toyota Camry or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ford Taurus, Toyota Camry, Honda Accord. That's what they drive. And typically the guy that's driving a Lamborghini, he's got no money. He's full of crap. I'm not against the Lamborghinis. Believe me, I'm not. I love them. It's a beautiful car. But it's expensive. And typically the millionaire looks at that. Interesting. Here, I got another idea. Jim Rohn said, I'll ask you a question. Jim Rohn said, if you won $1 million, what's the first thing you need to do?
Make $1.
No. Not even close. If you won $1 million, which, by the way, if you were a millionaire, you could never win $1 million because they don't play the lottery. They just don't.
Right.
Their money's too valuable to them. And I already gave you the hint. If you won $1 million, if somebody gave you $1 million, let's say you inherited it. So that's cool. You inherited $1 million. What's the first thing you need to do?
Invest it or have a plan to do something with it.
become a millionaire. Jim, I already am a millionaire. No, you're not. You have $1 million. Doesn't make you a millionaire.
The mindset.
Become a millionaire. How does a millionaire think? So that's why I studied millionaires, because I wanted to know how they thought, what they said, how they said it, where they showed up, where they didn't show up. What did they do? I wanted to know that. And as I studied and studied, I started to figure out what they did. And guess what? I wasn't doing any of that stuff. So I started doing that stuff. And so you better become a millionaire. And what Jim Rohn said is, if you had $1 million, the first thing you do is you become a millionaire, lest you lose it all. What happens to people that hit the lottery, statistically speaking? You want to Google it, Luke?
They just
hit the lottery,
crash and burn.
some crazy amount of time. I think in the 70 percentile range, they go bankrupt. They literally do. You can Google it. Look it up right now. While you're listening to this message, look it up. I think it's close to 70%, maybe higher. They go bankrupt.
Yeah.
How could you go bankrupt when you have $1 million? Because you're not a millionaire.
Yeah.
And you start, what are you going to do? I'm going to buy a car for a house for my mom. I'm going to buy a Lamborghini. I'm going to go on that dream vacation. That's not what millionaires do. Like you said, they invested, but that's what a millionaire does. But you're not a millionaire yet, in terms of the mentality.
Sure.
But that is millionaire mentality. And that's why a millionaire will never win the lottery, because they don't play. I don't gamble. I just don't. No. Money's too valuable.
Yeah, I mean,
cash is king.
Geez, gambling, there's such a risk to think about it. The house always wins. I mean, you might win some percentage of the time.
Where's the
but
risk? There's no risk. Gambling is not risky at all. You're going to lose. There's no risk.
But like you
You're
go
gonna
into
lose.
these places and look how nice they are.
Yeah,
These chandeliers
no kidding.
that are
Figure it out.
Tens and $20,000.
You're going to lose.
And
There's no risk. I might win. Yeah, you might not. You might not. No, it's not a good idea. But for me, it's not. And you do what you want to do. It's your world. It's your life. It is America. And if you want to gamble, gamble. But that's not what millionaires do. Are there millionaires who gamble? Of course there are. But typically, no, they don't.
yeah. Yeah. And it's such a good explanation of what did it look like for your dad and that team to go from nothing. He wasn't in the process the whole way, but just having that mindset of, okay, today we need to figure out what this next step is.
Yeah.
Okay, we need to figure. I think sometimes people think of it so macro. I'll talk to folks and they'll be like, this is where I want to be in 10 years. Great. What are you doing in the next 3 months?
Yeah,
right?
What are you doing today?
Yep.
But also, back to that thing of starting a business, I really do think you need to go back to the fundamentals. Cash is king, human capital, processes. And so in order to start a business, you're going to have some cash. So those of you who are out there working right now, you've got this dream of starting your own business someday, you got to start banking dough. And you got to get to a point where you have a basic understanding of working capital, and you can also make loans, which is a little risk, but you got to have cash on hand.
Right.
Or your probability. I'm a math guy. Probability states that you won't make it. It's very challenging.
Yeah, runway is so important. I remember when I started Clear Sun Consulting, which we've had for about 13 years now, my wife had maternity leave pay and the company she was working for was shutting down. So she basically had a year runway without any need to make money. They're going to pay her for pretty much the next year.
Nice.
Which is very kind of them. Sure. For maternity leave and basically severance pay. So I basically had a runway of like 6 months to a year, depending on, because the severance pay may have ended a couple of months sooner. We weren't exactly sure. But I had a year to make this thing solvent. And it was like a race against the clock of, okay, this month I made $600. Like that
but on top of that,
right?
So as you're preparing to start this business, you need to get cash in the bank. Perhaps you have equity in your home, so that's a fallback plan. You don't want to take out a home equity loan, but if you got into a jam, you could. And I had all those things. I had properties. I had this or that. No, this is me. I didn't start a business. I never started a new business, but I was able to borrow money. Like when I was bankruptcy imminent, I had to borrow money to float.
Yep.
I was done.
Yep.
And I did. And I got the thing floating. And
been there before. Yep.
yeah, I was done. It was over.
Yep.
And so then I started making money, and I was able to get that working capital loan ultimately paid off. So I didn't have that anymore. And again, started building cash.
Yep. Things are tough. And what
you
that
hanging.
story look like of growth. That's really,
Be aware. Be aware. I would say beware and be aware.
Yes.
Both. Beware. Careful what you wish for. Working for somebody else and making money and paying your bills, that's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Be careful what you wish for. And if you really do want to start your own business, then take the opportunity to give as much value to your present employer as you can, make a lot of money, get raises, get promotions, etc., and then save money. Saving money is a really good idea. I don't care what people tell you today. Cash in the bank gives you a lot of security. Saving money is a good idea. I still, to this day, I put a certain amount of money, which will go unsaid. I pay into my account every single month. And I'm telling you right now, it's a big number because I'm thinking about down the road. Wow. And I can tell you, I have enough money that I literally was talking to Amy about this just last night. I said, my goal back in the day, I wanted to have enough money that I could do whatever I wanted to do, whenever I wanted to do it, and not have to worry about it. And I literally said this to Amy last night. I said, so if you want to go to Italy, let's go to Italy. We can do it. But it wasn't always that way.
Yeah.
And that's why it's very important to, no matter who you are, if you're a single family household, if you're one person, whatever you are, you need to save money. Stop wasting it. It's so important.
Yeah.
So
thank you, Jim.
my pleasure.
Thank you guys. And we'll see you on the next episode.